My name is Chris Willis. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Acrolinx. Acrolinx is AI-powered software that improves the quality, fitness, and impact of content. Now, today, I want to talk to you about improving content's impact. But before I do that, I think we need to lay out some assumptions. So, kind of set the stage for what we're going to be talking about. Here we are in 2022. We're still in pandemic recovery, and I think that's important. 2, personalization as a technology solution, and this is a provocative statement, is dying. GDPR and your laws in California and IP obfuscation through iOS and Google, and it's making it more difficult to track visitors. Finally, 3, we need a more organic way to connect with our audiences because we're still in a pandemic and people aren't going out all the time and personalization is dying. So impact of content is critical. So you want to dig into that a little bit? Let's go ahead and do that. So talking about how we're still in pandemic recovery, and look, I've been doing this for quite some time. I think for almost a decade, maybe more, we've been marketing a concept of digital shift. All companies need to be ready because someday, consumers are going to turn to online customer experience. Online, right? We didn't really think that was going to happen. I mean, we thought it was an interesting marketing message. But then on March 11th, which is a date that I see all the time. It's the date that my flip calendar is set to on my desk at my office that I don't go to anymore. The rules changed. And as a result of COVID, consumers spend a lot of time online. They do almost all of their interactions there. They deal with brands through online customer experience touch points. Now, today we're coming back and, the companies that did this, that made that shift, that were deliberate in the creation of their customer experience, differentiated themselves by expanding and retaining customer base during this difficult time. You recognize those companies, you know them, you see them all the time. But here's the thing, many companies create customer experience content in a state of chaos. So it's not sustainable. It's not something that can continue the way that it's working. These companies aren't deliberate. They're not governed, and that makes a difference, right? So, circling back to the provocative statement that personalization is a dead technology, what do you do now? What do you do? Well, it's about creating amazing content that connects with your audiences. Now, I'm living this every day. Changing laws, along with digital shift that we've been put through, has fundamentally transformed the customer experience from a push model to a pull model. I can't just find phone numbers, specifically in Europe right now, and call them, right? It's not just hard, it's not allowed. I need to create touch points that provide value to my audiences. I know that's crazy. And then connect with them the way that they want to hear us. The most important touch points between a business and today's global consumers are those written pieces of content that you all create. It's the byproduct of what we do when we come to work. Enterprises are investing huge money into the millions of pages of content across all kinds of formats with different intent and different objectives, but for a single purpose of serving a customer experience at all levels. All levels of the business, right? From product creation to knowledge, education, marketing, post-sales service and support, everything else in between. This content is the way we do business today. Whether it's part of the consideration process, the transaction process, the retention process, the loyalty process, every piece of content has a purpose. The impact of that content matters. Sidebar. I'm saying the word content a lot, so much that it's starting not to sound like a word in my head. When you say the word over and over again, eventually it doesn't sound like that word anymore. Anyway, when I say content, it could be anything. And I hear from time to time, I don't really know what you mean when you say content. And that's fine. It could be anything. It could be as simple as UI in a product. It could be the thing you see on a screen. It could be a web page. It could be text on a billboard. It could be the chat content in a chatbot, product descriptions, long form documents like ebooks and white papers. It's not a single thing. It's a one-to-many communication. One person writes it, many people read it, and it's best when it feels like a one-to-one communication. You wrote it to me. But if you don't believe me, let's talk through it. Let's look at the actual importance of these digital touch points, shall we? So moving beyond the real world, if you will, the touch points that are shared between a brand and its audience are those precious moments that you get with your consumer. Success is when those moments leave a positive impression. Create something good with your audience and deliver value back to the business. So when you think about it, customers and prospects are interacting with your touch points every second via all kinds of channels. There's 4.5 billion people connected to the internet right now, and 3.5 billion Google searches every day, clicks on paid digital channels, direct and indirect visits on a website via social media, referral sites. All of these things matter. There is no throwaway touch point. Obvious example that we deal with every day, emails. Not throwaway. We're writing them quickly, we're shooting them out, but that's a primary touch point. Online, offline campaigns on various channels, products that create touch points via their user interface. Everybody in your organization is creating content touch points, and all of those points matter. All of them have an expected outcome, and that might mean, let's just take one thing, take a web page. Your measurement of that web page content is visits, its engagement, its bounce rates, its open rates, its click-through rates, its conversions. So let's look at an example of that. Single subdomain of a major enterprise website, and this is not made up, it's actually real, gets billions of visits every year. Average visit, 4.5 minutes. What's 4.5 minutes really? I've been talking for more than that now. But if you look at it across billions of visits, it's 4.5 billion minutes. Billion. That's user experience at a global scale. These are big numbers, but they only represent a fraction of what's actually happening out there, a fraction of the total amount of touch points. But this is a specific company. So you have to look. How do you establish metrics that are going to drive a degree of positivity versus neutral or negative customer experience as a result of the content that people are touching? If your content is throwaway, if it's not thought through, if it's written in chaos, is it having the impact? If the majority of your 4.5 billion minutes of engagement was negative, is that a problem? What does that impact? Because think about it, like there's a likelihood, right, that revenue is going to take a hit, retention is going to take a hit, net promoter score is going to take a hit as a result of the fact that you didn't think about the very real fact that people are spending billions of minutes with you and taking something away from that experience. But look, it's more challenging than that, right? Right? Because we create content as a byproduct of what we do when we go to work. It's in our department, it's our team. We create content. That content should feed upward into the broader organization, into the content collection. But in a lot of cases, right, it's not. This content collection inside an enterprise needs to have C-level attention. It needs to be a C-level initiative. C-level leaders have to take an active role in the entire customer experience. Content plays a major role, is a major asset in your business. One of the things that we've learned over the course of the last several years is that companies don't really understand the value of content because they don't have it as a line item unless you outsource every piece of content to an agency. So content is a byproduct, again, of people coming to work. It's headcount. It doesn't have a budget. But when you collect all that work, lay it out in front of you, a single enterprise with millions of content pieces and an average content creation cost of, and argue with me, but let's just say a single website costs $1,100 to build. You've created in that million page, the million pages of content, you've created $1 billion asset. That content in a lot of businesses, in large part, is unmanaged. You have $1 billion asset in your business, but you don't think about that and you're not managing it as such because you haven't written $1 billion check. You've paid people salary, but you don't have a line item that says $1 billion, and you're not managing it as if it were $1 billion asset, second only to, for instance, your product and your brand value. Again, content is creating the connections with consumers when people can't, like now during a pandemic. And like I said, that single subdomain, billion visits, 4.5 billion minutes of user experience a year. But the end part of this is that many businesses, you're not looking at trying to touch these or tie these touch points to business value. We're creating content because content is required. We're not creating content to deliver impact. I'm gonna let that sit for a second. But before I go any further, I guess I need to talk about what I'm talking about, right? So talking about governing your content versus governing your impact. So I think when people think about content governance, a lot of times they're just thinking about governing quality, making content less embarrassing, helping writers create better work product. Good grammar, correct spelling, cool, important. I like to call it creating less embarrassing content, right? Getting spelling errors out, grammar errors out. That's fantastic. But where the rubber really hits the road is in governing the impact of all of that content that's created. So you've created this less embarrassing content. Now, let's make it more impactful. Let's help that content achieve and exceed its goals. That's an important differentiation. Quality content is good, it's important, but still might not deliver the expected impact because we haven't taken that step to optimize it yet. So look, governing for impact, right? It's critical, but it's something that's not done very often. Your content is quickly created, chaotically. It's supposed to speak for the company, but it's written by thousands of people with lots of different jobs. Time, budget constraints. It doesn't allow for the creation of connected content. And content tends to be a series of words and points that don't really speak as a business. It's not always built with personality, emotion, persuasion. Companies have content goals and guidelines, but they're lightly understood and lightly governed. The world that we need to live in is about creating connections through the customer experience. It's about creating content that's the face of the business. It's about content that promotes emotion and brand loyalty and engagement and action. It's about building trust in relationships with customers. Now, how do you do that? Well, it's about looking at the things that make your content resonate. It's clarity, consistency, character, readability, its tone of voice, its terminology, empathy, inclusivity, all of those things. All these components that go into the creation and measurement of what we consider to be amazing, impactful content. We believe that companies need to look at this customer experience holistically. The best content, or the content that's been created for impact, is going to perform measurably better in literally every area. So in order to create this impactful content, you need to think about that all the way back into context. Content needs to be designed to answer a specific question. What is the question? How do I want to answer it? And then I didn't need to think about demand, really, right? Or did I? What questions are actually being asked in the world? Oh, I do need to think about demand. Is this answer valuable? Will anybody see it? What's its reach? You need to think about these as you're developing this content. Is this going to be findable? Will anybody actually see it in its intended audience? And once it gets there, is it going to create action? Maybe the creation of this content we're talking about is designed to connect with readers and create that action, right? Shouldn't it be? And if that action is one page, if that action is reducing bounce, if that action is conversion, we can see, we can measure that, we can understand the impact, and we can evolve. What if we create the perfect piece of content and it doesn't convert? What can we learn from that? It's back to that strategy aligned versus audience aligned. I think this content is perfect. My audience does not. Can we learn from that disconnect and inform the process and get better over time creating this impactful content? That's not just the goal, that's the imperative right now, is to take your strategy, align it with your audience, and iterate and get closer. The first thing is we need to understand, measuring impact requires critical business objectives. As it turns out, the aspiration of wanting high quality content isn't enough to get your management within your large enterprise excited enough to start a governance initiative of any kind. It means something, yes, but it's not as critical as other initiatives. Trying to tie content to its end goal helps make the work you do more of a business imperative. So I want to save money. Again, it's hard to talk about content and saving money because it's not always a line item. But if I'm going to, let's aim at things that are measured. Let's aim at hard cost savings associated with where we put headcount, where we put time and effort. Let's talk about creation capacity and getting more content for less. Let's talk about, directly tying it to initiatives inside the business. If we're talking about service and support content, can we reduce the calls into a support desk? That's something that somebody cares about, real dollars that somebody's measured on. And that makes a difference, right? That's what makes content impactful. So, let's look at risk. It's one thing to want to reduce risk in our content, but what is the risk? Where are we seeing and experiencing the downside of risk in our content? And that's in fines in regulated industries. It's in brand and reputational issues associated with non-inclusive language. Again, initiatives that reach all the way to the executive organization in your business. From a customer experience standpoint, it's about being able to use the product that you sell successfully. It's about learning to use that. It's about the ability to tie content, good content, to expansion, retention, customer satisfaction, net promoter score. Things, again, that people rely on the measure of inside your business. Things that are critical. The end goal of your content. And finally, performance. And this is, I think, the most obvious one. Your content driving organic traffic, driving engagement, driving conversions that result in pipeline, that result in revenue. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where content becomes critical. It helps to start delivering content that's impactful to reach these business outcomes, not just because it's good for you and your team, but because it has a bottom line or top line result for your business. I was with a customer not so long ago that when asked, how is your content measured inside your business? How do you know it's working? Without even thinking, she answered, revenue. We see revenue as a result of our content. Revenue increases as a result of our content. That's impact. That's real. And that drives business. I want to close with the required capabilities you need to be able to do this, to be able to deliver full content impact. And look, for many years, companies have thought about content as either high quality or not high quality. And that's cool, right? And that's part of any initiative. You need to be able to understand what content is measurably good and not good. So enterprise authoring assistance, this guidance, has to be part of your solution. Grammar, spelling, clarity, and more. It's important. But it's only the first part. Because while many companies have and use this enterprise authoring assistance, they don't legislate that everybody uses it. You can't. Like, I can't get that in front of everyone. And you don't push those tools out to your vendors, to your agencies, to your third-party content creators. I mean, you could try, but I'll bet you can't. So there's content that's going to come in through other channels outside of your governance model. And then you're going to end up with two pools of content. Content that matches your strategy and content that doesn't. And how do you do that? How do you manage that? You know, some percentage is good. Some percentage is at best unknown. And that's where automation comes in the form of quality gates, the ability to see all of your content, everything that's headed towards post-production into the world has to go through those gates, right? It follows your governance. And if it does, if it passes, that's great, it's cleared to go. If it doesn't, it can be sent back for improvement. Every piece of content matters, not just some of it. But all of this only gets you to a point of strategy alignment. We talked about that, right? I built my strategy. I identified how I want to create content. I built that into a governance model, and I pushed that out through my organization. I built that out through quality gates. All of this aligns with what I think. Question, though, is do I necessarily know that I'm right? Do I know that my content aligns with my audience? And the answer is no. That's a hard thing to know without a connection between performance analytics and content analytics, right? So the last phase of delivering impactful content is understanding how my content is being received by my audiences and aligning that with how I think, how I know my content is created, so that I can see that my great content that I've created is performing, or more importantly, not performing in the real world. Because if it's not performing and I think it's perfect, my model's wrong. And I need to adjust. So if you're just looking at quality, it's only part of the picture. If you're adding some form of automation to gate your organization and ensure that you're checking all of your content regardless of where it comes from, you're headed in the right direction. But if you can take your perfect content and measure its performance in the real world and align that back and learn from that and build better content going forward, you've moved towards audience alignment. And that's where all of this comes together to deliver the most impact. So look, thank you very much for your attention today. And I look forward to talking to each and every one of you individually about how to get more out of your content and how to deliver only impactful content going forward. My name is Chris Willis. You can reach me at chris@acrolinx.com or on LinkedIn at CP Willis. Thank you again for your time, and I hope to talk to you soon.